Babes in Spyland. How Now, Sad Cow. Episode 12. It was like being stuck in a bad dream. Agent Amphibian Queen couldn't breathe and she couldn't move. The half of her covered with chocolate felt ice cold, while the rest of her flushed with frustrated anger. Hans and the other goons, all far enough away not to be covered in the now frozen solid chocolate, sprang into motion. 2 of them grabbed the secretary's limp frame, while another 2 came after her. She couldn't turn her head to see Bunnynose, Spike, or his guys. All she could do was stand there, flailing one arm as the men came at her. Just before they arrived, a blur flew past her, and one of the men went down hard. Agent Bunnynose, her head, hair, and shoulders covered in pink, turned on the other Swiss mister and shot him. He twitched as he fell to the ground, flopping like a fish. Agent Amphibian Queen almost felt bad for him, but not quite. "You okay?" Bunnynose asked. "The secretary," Amphibian Queen said out of the unfrozen side of her mouth. "Don't let Hans take the secretary." Bunnynose didn't need to know that she felt like someone was trying to shove a pillow down her throat, or that she potentially had sad cow disease. "Hans?" Bunnynose asked, jerking her head at the Swiss mister. When Amphibian Queen muttered a yes, Bunnynose moved off, out of Amphibian Queen's field of vision. Yelling, grunting, shooting, and the sound of people running followed. A moment later, the main doors boomed open, and out of the very corner of her eye, Amphibian Queen saw more security pour into the room. Spike appeared, concern turning his lips into a frown. "Frozen?" he asked. She tried to nod, but ended up wheezing out a, "Yup." "Don't move." Why did people always say that when there was no possible way you could actually move? Spike pulled a small heat gun from his belt. A moment later, the chocolate began to thaw. It felt like going out on a sunny day after being stuck in a building with the air conditioning going full blast, wearing a sundress. The warmth spread, and the pink shell started to drip onto the floor. "Almost there," Spike said as he helped her get a leg free. Amphibian Queen wiggled whatever she could, and a few seconds later, she was out. She tried to take a step, but sagged to the ground. No amount of gasping was getting air to her lungs. What had been in that syringe? Bunnynose appeared next to her. "What is it?" she asked, alarm in her voice. No," Amphibian Queen managed in a rough voice. "Can't breathe." Dark splotches gathered around the edges of her vision, and the spinning of the room sped up. "What happened?" Bunnynose demanded, shaking Amphibian Queen's shoulder. Mustering all of her remaining breath, Amphibian Queen said, "A syringe." "What?" Bunnynose asked. "What are you talking about?" Around them, people ran and feet tromped. The pull of oblivion felt good, and Amphibian Queen didn't want to resist. She just wanted to sleep. "He got her with an injection," CB's voice said from far away. "An injection of what?" Bunnynose asked. "Not sure," CB said. "What would cause this?" Spike's gloved hand reached out and touched her face. "She's all swollen." "She just got frozen," Bunnynose said. CB spoke. "Is she allergic to anything?" Bunnynose snorted. "A few things, mostly plants, but she's on pills." The voices got farther and farther away. Amphibian Queen lowered herself to the floor, resting her cheek on the chocolate-covered wood. It probably shouldn't have felt nice, but it did. "Does she have an EpiPen?" Spike asked. "As far as I know, she's never needed one," Bunnynose said. "I've got one." Someone gently lifted Amphibian Queen's arm and turned it over. A moment later, she felt the pinprick of a needle and another round of searing liquid being shot into her body. She closed her eyes tighter, as if that might help, and wondered if, in the official report, it would say, "Killed in the line of duty by sad cow disease and a fear of slim metal objects." This was not a cool way to die. Still, she wondered how long death would let her linger, mocking her with its cruel irony before allowing her to move on. While that lovely thought rattled around in her skull, a spark of life pushed it to one side. Air. Smoky, burned, acrid campfire mixed with chocolate got past the pillow in her throat, giving her lungs a glimpse of oxygen. Her body sucked it up and distributed it. Some of it must have gotten to her brain, because it told her to try a deeper breath. The stuttering inhale felt like the first time she'd jumped out of an airplane. Exhilarating, death-defying, and terrifying, all at once. Her mind switched back on, and a moment later, several pairs of hands turned her over and laid her on her back. Blinking against the light, Amphibian Queen saw Bunny Nose, CB, and Spike, all hovering over her like little kids watching a top as it spun to a halt. "Are you with us?" Bunny Nose asked. Amphibian Queen nodded. Bunny Nose let out a deep sigh, shaking her head. "You scared me." "Sorry," Amphibian Queen said in a raspy voice. Then she remembered the secretary. "Did Hans get away with the secretary?" "Hans?" CB asked. Spike shook his head, pulling off his helmet. His short hair stood in clumps, and his dark chocolate eyes met hers. "No, ma'am, he did not get away. My men tell me you were the main reason for that. Well done." "Thanks," Amphibian Queen muttered, embarrassed by the attention. Spike's cheeks twitched like he wanted to say something. After a moment, he did. "Never thought I'd face off against a real Swiss mister." The grin that split his face said it all. Amphibian Queen rolled her eyes. Boys. "I was wondering why the guy in the factory was so tough," Bunny Nose said. "But what were they doing here?" At that moment, the Secretary of Agriculture walked over, apparently recovered from the stun and mostly covered in pink chocolate. Amphibian Queen's body started responding to her, so she sat up, with Spike's help. "We've called an ambulance," the Secretary said, nodding at Amphibian Queen. "She needs medical attention right away." "It was just an allergic reaction," Bunny Nose said. The Secretary frowned. "An allergic reaction to sad cow disease?" Bunny Nose opened her mouth to argue, or protest, or maybe just yell at someone, but CB stopped her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sad cow disease isn't real," he said to the Secretary. "I wasn't lying. The whole thing is a farce." "But how can that be?" the Secretary asked, furrowing his chocolate-encased eyebrows together. "We have cows in our own country that have been infected." CB shook his head. "Not infected, just fed some downers." "Downers?" "Drugs," CB explained, waving one hand. "Depressants, whatever you want to call them. Probably in the water that they drink or the salt licks. It won't take us long to find it." All of the faces regarded him with blank expressions. CB sighed and then took a breath. "I've been researching this for months. The milk is fine when it comes from the cows. We proved that today with our experiment. However, sometime during transport, or maybe even in the pails it gets put into, it's laced with something that's changing the taste and the consistency." "But why would anyone do that?" Amphibian Queen asked. Then she remembered something. Hans said that the government was going to make a lot of money. What was that about? The Secretary cleared his throat and scratched an eyebrow, chocolate flaking off and floating to the floor. "For years, the Swiss have been a monopoly on providing the chocolate delicacies that all governments serve at official functions." He looked around and lowered his voice. "When their milk went bad, other companies begged for the chance to take the contract." Bunny Nose put up a hand. "Wait, this was all about chocolates?" He shook his head. "No, it's about the billions of dollars a year that the company that provides the chocolates for government functions earns. We have half a dozen chocolate makers begging for the chance to take over." "So who started this?" Amphibian Queen asked. "Who stands to gain the most?" And was that person someone who wasn't in the room? No one answered. Even the Secretary pressed his lips together and said nothing. Amphibian Queen turned her attention to Bunny Nose. Her partner had gone after Lady Cluck, but Amphibian Queen had to assume that she'd gotten away, since Bunny Nose had ended up in here. Bunny Nose confirmed with a shake of her head. She hadn't caught the criminal. First Sci-5 and now this. They were going to have a lot to discuss with Mud. Spike offered her his hand. She accepted and let him pull her to her feet. "You should get to the hospital. That EpiPen will wear off in less than an hour." "Thanks," she said. He nodded. "I have to attend to my men." She smiled. "Where can we send the thank you cards?" "I'll let you know." Bunny Nose let her glare wander around the room, as if daring the world to throw one more thing at them. She glanced to the right and stiffened. Amphibian Queen followed her gaze and found Social coming toward them, her singed skirt flapping behind her like a broken wing. "Please no," Bunny Nose muttered. "Be nice," Amphibian Queen muttered back. a pair of medics appeared at her side and forced her onto a gurney. Social kept coming. Amphibian Queen saw her partner get ready to jump out of the way, but before she could, Social threw her arms around the surprised agent and sobbed into her shoulder. "You saved us! I always knew the two of you had it in you. I knew it!" Bunnynose stood frozen, eyes wild. She threw Amphibian Queen a pleading "help me" look, but Amphibian Queen could only smirk at her partner's discomfort. After a moment, Bunnynose stiffly patted Social's back. "You're okay," she told the hysterical woman. While Bunnynose was occupied, and before the medics wheeled her away, CB approached. "I realize this isn't the best time." He smiled at her and then glanced at Bunnynose, who still stood with a crying Social know-all clinging to her. "But I was wondering—" Amphibian Queen held up her hand. "Offer to take her for steak and then ice cream." He blinked, blue eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Trust me," Amphibian Queen said. "Bunnynose will be your best friend forever if you feed her today." CB studied her for a moment before he grinned. "Thanks." She smiled. One good thing to come out of a horrible day. Well, maybe two, she amended, catching Spike giving her a wink from across the room. He held his finger and thumb up to his ear and mouth like a phone, then pointed at his hip pocket. Amphibian Queen slipped her hand into her pant pocket and found a small piece of paper there with a phone number on it. Spike mouthed, "Call me," before turning to bark orders at someone. Yep, that was definitely a blush coming on. What a day. No one was going to believe that they'd taken down a cell of Swiss misters. If it wasn't for that foul Lady Cluck, things would be back to normal. Or as normal as they ever got, anyway. Lady Cluck had slipped away from them twice now, which meant it was personal.